Loops are so important that I thought it might be useful to see another example of a running loop. And in this example, I'll demonstrate something that's kind of subtle but really important. And that's that we don't use a while loop or any loop to create animation. Remember that in processing, we create something that looks like animation by moving things from one frame to another. So processing calls draw, we draw a frame, and we show that frame until processing calls draw again. So any loops that we use are used to help us draw a single frame, not to create an animation. We need to use other techniques to manage the change of shapes and their motion from one frame to the next. And that's part of what I'll demonstrate here. So here's the picture I'd like to make. It's just a yellow background with 5 bars. And I mentioned one of the beautiful things about loops is you can change the number of objects you have. I'm going to fix this at 5. So it's very specific and I can pick numbers for everything and demonstrate it for you very concretely. So this is the first frame, these 5 bars. The second frame, the bars will get longer. The third frame, the bars will get longer still, and that will be our animation. The bars get longer and longer on every frame. So let's see how to draw a single frame. Here's the starting scenario. The first box that will be in the upper left will have its upper left corner at 50-50. It will be 50 units high and 50 units wide. So we get a little square. So that's the first bar in the first frame is that little square. Now these bars all have the same height and they all have the same left position. So the only thing that changes from one bar to the next is the width and the top. So what's the change in width and the top location from this bar to the one just under it? Well, the width goes up by 50 because I've just decided each bar will be 50 units longer. And since the space between the bars is 50, then the top moves by 100. So now we can draw this bar. We know where the left is. We know where the top is. The top is at 150. We know the width is 100 and the height is 50, just like the last one. Now we go through the loop again. What happens to the value of width? We add 50 to it. What happens to the value of top? We add 100, and we can draw that bar. Now we go through the loop again. What happens to width? We add 50. What happens to top? We add 100, and we go through it again. Notice that I'm not writing down here the absolute values. I'm not saying, for example, this bar is 200 units wide. What I'm writing down is how width and top change from one bar to the next, because that's what's happening in the while loop. The loop is going to have a variable for the top and a variable for the width, and each time we go through the loop, we'll just add these values. So let's draw the last bar. Width will again go up by 50. The value of top, the top part of the bar, will also go up by 100, and now we can draw the final bar. So let me show you how we would actually do this. Let's lay out some variables and then we'll write the code. I'm going to say that there are 5 lines and a variable called y will step from the values 0 to 4. So before we start the loop, I will say y equals 0, and then each time through the loop, I'll say y equals y plus 1. So the first time through, y is 0. I'll create a variable called top, and that tells me the vertical location of the top of each bar. I'll also track, as we saw, the width of each bar, and I'll keep that in a variable called wid. So these are the 3 variables we care about. Y, which tells us which line we're drawing, wid, which tells us the width of the bar, and top tells us the top of the bar. At the start of the loop, we'll set top to 50 and width to 50, and then each time through the loop, as y goes up by 1, we'll add 100 to top and 50 to width. And that will cause each bar to be further down the screen and wider. When the loop is all finished and we've drawn all 5 bars, that's the end of the loop, and then that's the end of draw. To create the animation, rather than starting the width of the first bar at 50, we might start it at 60, and then we add 50 to each one. And then on the next frame, we might start at 70 and then 80. So the top bar gets wider over time, and each of the bars beneath it just keep picking up that value and adding 50 to it, so they get wider as well. So just to nail it down, let's walk through the loop. At y equals 0, top and width have their starting values of 50 and 50. Then we add something to top and we add something to width to create new values of top and width. And now y equals 1. And each time through the loop, we add values to top and width and then draw the new bar. Then we add values to top and width and we draw the new bar. And when we're all done, we have a picture. When we're ready to draw the next frame, instead of making the first bar 50 units, let's say maybe we make it 100 units. All the others are just 50 units bigger than the one above them. Then for the third frame, the top bar, maybe it's 150 units. And then each bar below it is 50 units wider. And in this way, all the bars will just get bigger and bigger and bigger until finally they all fall off the screen. Here's the program running at just 1.5 frames per second. As we expect, the bars are getting wider and wider, and after just a few frames, they're all so wide they fall off the screen. But that's okay, that's all I'm asking for from this simple little animation. So let's now see how to write this code. Here's the program we just talked about, ready for us to step through and watch it run. On the left is the code, and at the very top you can see a red bar, and that indicates which line we're about to execute. On the right-hand side is a rectangle, and that will hold our graphics window. And at the bottom, I'm displaying the variables that we care about in this program. In fact, it's all the variables in this program. Y, top, and width aren't yet declared before the program begins, and they don't have values. So I'm using a star to mean no value yet. Frame count does have a value because that's managed for us by processing, and it starts out with the value 1. So let's take a look at the code and run it. At the top, we can see we're about to start setup. So we'll go into setup, call size, create the graphics window. At this point, I would usually call smooth and some other things, but I'm keeping things short. So we're out of setup. Now we're about to call draw for the first time. Our first call is to background. Great, we fill it in with the background color. We set the fill color for our boxes, and now we set the top and width of the first box. The first box, its top is at 50, and its width is 50 times frame count. By multiplying it by frame count, that makes it get larger on every frame. Right now, frame count is 1, so 50 times 1 is just 50. So we'll move on past that line, and if you look at the bottom, you'll see that now top and width both have the value 50. Now we'll declare the variable y, and we'll start it out with the value of 0 because we're about to draw the very first line, and at the bottom you can see y equals 0, and now we're at the while loop. The test here is asking, is y less than 5? Y is 0. 0 is definitely less than 5, so this is true. So we'll draw a rectangle using the current values of top and width for the top and width, and 50 for the left edge and 50 for the height. So there's our first little rectangle, and now we prepare for the next one by adding 100 to top, and you can see at the bottom now top is 150, and we'll add 50 to width, and you can see at the bottom width just went up to 100. Finally, we'll add 1 to y, and if you look at the bottom, y goes from 0 to 1, and that's the end of the loop. We're now ready to draw the next box if we need it, so we go back up to the top of the loop, while y is less than 5. Y is now 1. 1 is less than 5. So we go into the loop, we draw the rectangle with the current top and width, we add 100 to top, we add 50 to width, we add 1 to y, and back up to the top of the loop. 2 is less than 5. So you can see what we're doing. And I'm just going to step through this. We're going to draw the fourth bar, and now we're drawing the fifth bar. We just drew it. Anticipating that there might be another bar, we add 100 to top, we add 50 to the width, we add 1 to y, so checking that the bottom, our display, y is now 5, and we go back up to the top of the loop. 5 less than 5 is the test. 5 is not less than 5. 5 is equal to 5. It's not less than 5. So the test fails, and we're done with the loop. We leave the loop, and in fact, we're at the end of draw, and we are done, and we show this frame to the world. Now, a 60th of a second goes by, and processing calls draw again. Now we're starting a fresh new frame. First thing we do is we call background, fill it in, set up our fill color, set the top. We know that the top of the first bar is always at 50. And now frame count has the value 2. Now the width is going to be 100. or 50 times 2. And that's going to make it wider. And now every bar is going to pick that up because each bar is just 50 units wider than the one above it. So, okay, we'll set width to be 50 times frame count. And if you look at the bottom, width is now 100. We set Y to be 0, and we do exactly what we did on the last frame. Everything is the same. The only thing that changed was the starting value of width, which got larger because frame count got larger. So we test, is 0 less than 5? Yes, it is. We draw the first rectangle. It's now wider than it was because width started at a larger value. We add 100 to top, we add 50 to width, we add 1 to Y, and back up to the top of the loop. 1 is less than 5. Draw the rectangle, and I'll just step through it. You know what's happening here. And here's our second frame, where all the bars are a little bit wider than they were before. Now we reach the end. Is 5 less than 5? No, it's not. We exit the loop, we're finished. Back up to the third frame, and let's just walk through the beginning of it so you can see how the third frame begins. We draw the background, we set the fill color, we set the value of top, 50 as always, and now the width is 3 times 50 because frame count is 3. So now the first bar will be 150 units wide. We set Y to 0, Y is less than 5, yes it is, so we draw the first bar. It's now wider than it was before, and stepping through the loop, each bar is 50 units wider than the one above it. And this is the way that we create animation, by drawing each frame slightly different than the frame before it. The loop is used to create lots of objects within the frame. I hope that this gives you a better understanding of how to use a loop. Remember that your frame only gets displayed when draw ends, and draw will only end if your while loop ends, which means somehow, some way, the test in your while loop has to become false at some point. If you forget or you mess it up, and we all do, don't worry about it. Just hit the go away button in the top of your graphics window, or again, often that won't work. Don't panic. Hit the stop button in the processing window. That almost always will really stop it. And then go in and, scratch your head, figure out why the while test is never becoming false, give it a fix, and try it again. Eventually you'll fix it up, and you'll be off and running. I encourage you to become comfortable with these things because they enable you to greatly expand the complexity of the images you're drawing. If you want to have 1,000 bars, that's no trouble. Just let this loop go from 0 to 1,000. You'll have to change the constants, but you can get a very interesting pattern of bars, and you don't have to sit there and type rect 1,000 times. So try out some loops. You're going to love them.